The Tay Ghillies Association has been pursuing the Scottish Government to deliver against its wild salmon implementation plan. Little to no progress has been made over the last 12 months. Sadly, the Greens and the SNP have done next to nothing since the plan was released. Fresh from the 2024 general election, the electorate has voted against their lack of action in many areas of government and for change moving forward. We hope that the elected politicians listen to what needs to be done to prevent the wild Atlantic salmon becoming extinct by 2050 or sooner. We ask experts from the Tay to discuss what needs to be done now to save this iconic fish.
As custodians and gillies, we could see this decline rapidly happening. Only last December, the International Union for Conservation of Nature moved the Atlantic salmon from least concerned to near threatened, with new evidence showing a global population decrease by 23% between 2006 and 2020. Already in 2024, we are seeing a decline in the numbers of Atlantic salmon returned to our rivers. This is having a massive effect on our local businesses, hotels, shops, retail. It's all impacted by the decline of salmon. That trend is ever downwards. The end is inevitable sooner than we think. But we can do something. And we applaud the Scottish Government Wild Salmon Strategy Implementation Plan, which was released last year. However, the first progress report, released in March, was a huge disappointment. It is thin on detail and certainly did not give the impression that the plan delivery group was driven by a sense of urgency. We need to ensure the plan is delivered at pace, as was promised. Instead, they talk of reviewing policies, identifying areas of further research and setting up task and finish groups. Why can't they see what we can see? Don't they see our iconic fish as disappearing from Scottish rivers? We can see that action is required now, not at some time in the future. Please, please, help us halt this decline and save the wild Atlantic salmon.
There is little doubt that if we continue to prevaricate and hide behind the need for more and more science, the Atlantic salmon will be extinct by 2050. As well as the government delivering the plan actions, we also require action to mitigate the impacts of climate change and predation. We know there will be kickback from environmental groups about any thoughts on culling fish-eating birds to create a more optimum balance and help save one of Scotland's icons. But isn't it astonishing that no one says a word about slaughtering heavily pregnant red deerhounds, another Scottish icon? Why? To protect trees. Really? A measure that must be considered is stocking. NASCO have told us about the risks of stocking, but they've also given us guidelines to world-class stocking if we so initiate it. But we need to do something now before the fish becomes extinct. We need to be able to take broodstock from the river and start a stocking programme that will complement the implementation plan. There is scientific evidence of stocking programmes achieving a level of success when used in combination with other restoration efforts. In their latest report, NASCO says, when done with careful planning to consider genetic impacts, stocking hatchery salmon can be a critical restoration tool. It is time for the Scottish Government to be bold and to reconsider its stocking policy and work out how to bring in a stocking programme as part of the overall implementation plan. There is absolutely no point in worrying about genetic integrity if we do nothing and allow the salmon to disappear in a few years. Indeed, genetic integrity has been compromised already due to escapes from aquaculture and natural straying. Stocking will cost money, and it would be really good if the Scottish Government funded this rather than make grants of many millions to the very rich aquaculture industry on the West Coast. You really couldn't make it up. Introducing a well-managed stocking programme in concert with the other implementation plan actions will be seen by our rural communities as an extremely positive action by the Scottish Government. I am spending much of my time on efforts to help save the Atlantic salmon. I do that because I'm passionate about the species. My dad took me salmon fishing when I was 7 years old. We fished a lot together, and I learnt so much about the Atlantic salmon and, as important, about Scotland's environment. My grandson is almost 1, and I dream of the day in a few years when I can take him fishing and teach him about the Atlantic salmon and its importance to our environment. I do not want to have to tell him that our politicians did not do enough to save the salmon. I don't want to tell him that our king of fish, with us since the Ice Age, is lost forever because we really could not care enough to save it. I care a lot. We need more people to care and do something. If we don't do it now, the fish will become extinct and it will be too late.
NASCO clearly identifies the issues causing stress to the Atlantic salmon. It's these stressors, most of which are man-made, that the plan is designed to address. Many of the stressors will take time to alleviate, such as river temperatures through tree planting, improving habitats, and removing barriers. The aquaculture industry needs proper regulation and oversight, including, you would hope, moving to closed containment systems to stop pollution of the west coast seabed and the proliferation of sea life, which are damaging the wild fish. But we need to prioritise our actions. For example, what's the point of the tree planting to reduce temperatures in the tributaries in about 15 years' time if there's no salmon left by then to enjoy the cool water? We really must address these issues as quickly as possible and ensure that we use the precautionary approach which is advocated by NASCO. So in other words, even if we don't have all the answers, can we initiate the corrective measures now without delay? Climate change is causing havoc in our rivers. Since the beginning of September last year, there's been 11 named storms in the UK. Most of them affected Scotland. Excess rain, floods, spates, causing rivers to be washed away and eggs destroyed in the process. You know, the weather pattern, it might be with us for a foreseeable future. There might be more and more of a downward spiral in the numbers of the salmon that are dying. So we really do need to take action now and consider restocking some of these rivers to mitigate the effect of this adverse weather and stop the total decline of this iconic fish. So there's no doubt that climate change is affecting the weather around here. We've had massive floods on the River Tay this year and many other rivers in the UK, and it will no doubt have washed away a lot of the spawning grounds of the salmon. It really is important that we consider stocking the rivers now. The scientists play a wonderful role and they will get answers in due course, but we really need to do something now, and stocking is one of the things that we really should be doing.
Hi, my name's Tay Ghillies. I'm 78 years old, lived my life in Perth, Scotland, and had a career in the Merchant Navy, the last 20 years as Chief Engineer. I started fishing when I was 22, mostly as something to pass my time when on leave from the sea, because it was on my doorstep and I was interested in it as a hobby. From an early age I was shown the life of Atlantic salmon from my granny's shop on Shore Road, Perth, at McQuibben's Buildings, which was on the banks of the River Tay. Every time you looked at the river, salmon could be seen, either dead kelts on the river banks in winter or jumping fish working their way upriver during summer and autumn. A major hobby of people in those days was just to watch the salmon wherever they were jumping. Also, because the fish were so plentiful, going out to catch a fish for tea was a fairly common duty for a man, and he'd be back in an hour or so. Although permission to fish salmon was not easy to get, and one of the good reasons why Perth and District Angling Club was formed in 1951. On the Tay Street in autumn, there is hardly a splash in the river, as the number of salmon have plummeted to a very low numbers, which is a very sad sight. Although we have got a stainless steel salmon in Tay Street as part of the decorations, it's not really a replacement for a real live salmon, is it? The latest statement on the health of Atlantic salmon in Britain is that they could be extinct by 2050. What a disgrace. But why are the salmon numbers so low? For years and years the scientists have been telling us that all is well in the rivers, but that is just not true. The main problem at present is predation from both birds and seals. As far as the birds are concerned, there are gooseanders, mergansers and cormorants everywhere on the river. Some of these birds are not even native to Scotland, but are still protected. Studies were done on 147 gooseanders and 146 mergansers, and it was found that of those with full stomachs, around 75% of the contacts were salmonid. Some time ago, 2 gooseanders were shot on the River Bran, and each of the stomachs contained around 30 tags from smolts, 250 of which had only been released 3 days earlier. Please remember that these protected species are killing our wild salmon, and this is a major factor in its decline. The gooseander is not even a native bird to Scotland, only appearing in the late 1800s. Yet, like the seal, it is protected, and the salmon with us since the Ice Age is not. This really is not fair, and something needs to be done about it. Seals in the Tay estuary are also at record levels. These were controlled by the netsmen in earlier times. There are around 116,000 grey seals in Scotland and 37,000 common seals. Their daily food intake is the equivalent of 2 to 3 gills or 25 to 30 smolts per day. There are up to 2,000 grey seals at Tentsmuir in the Tay estuary. Imagine the damage to our smolt migration and returning adults running the gauntlet of this number of seals. These seals are also appearing further up in the high tide waterline, well upriver, causing havoc in the salmon pools. Stocking will be necessary to complement natural spawning. The Tay has a first-class hatchery and could support 2 million eggs a year if Marine Scotland would allow the taking of broodstock from the River Tay to use in the hatchery. Stocking on the Tay is not new. Fish ponds beat on the Tay was used for this in previous decades. Our politicians seem more interested in the fish farms than they are in the wild Atlantic salmon in the rivers. I would like to make a heartfelt plea to do everything we can to prevent the total loss of the Atlantic salmon, as this would make the world a far poorer place to live in. If, as feared, the Atlantic salmon becomes extinct in our lifetime, that would be a really heavy load for us to carry. Can you imagine the mighty Tay with no salmon?
We were greatly encouraged to hear of the Scottish Government's salmon implementation plan, most importantly, to be delivered at pace. This sadly has not been the case, and this needs to change.